I never meant to start keeping track. But when you've given your family over $150,000 while they call you too ambitious, you start noticing patterns. The blood ledger began as a simple spreadsheet: money out, excuses in. For 7 years, I bailed them out of every crisis while building my business from nothing. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "We gave your brother $100,000 for his house down payment," my mother announced. "You don't need help with your fancy career." The same parents who refused me a $3,000 loan were funding my unemployed brother's luxury lifestyle. That night, I added a new column to my spreadsheet: consequences. They thought I was just an ATM. They never imagined I was documenting every lie, every theft, every betrayal. Now I'm going to destroy my family as methodically as they exploited me. And when I'm done, I'll help every daughter trapped in the why. Same nightmare. I never meant to start keeping track. But when you've given your family over $150,000 while they call you too ambitious, you start noticing patterns. The blood ledger began as a simple spreadsheet: money out, excuses in. For 7 years, I bailed them out of every crisis while building my business from nothing. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "We gave your brother $100,000 for his house down payment," my mother announced. "You don't need help with your fancy career?" The same parents who refused me a $3,000 loan were funding my unemployed brother's luxury lifestyle. That night, I added a new column to my spreadsheet: consequences. They thought I was just an ATM. They never imagined I was documenting every lie, every theft, every betrayal. Now I'm going to destroy my family as methodically as they exploited me. And when I'm done, I'll help every daughter trapped in the same nightmare. The first time I bailed my parents out financially, I was 25 and had just landed my first major consulting client. Dad called with a tremor in his voice, something about property taxes and potential foreclosure. I transferred $5,000 without question. "You're such a good daughter, Eliza," Mom said. "Always so responsible." I didn't think to ask where their money had gone, or why my brother Jake, 27 and finding himself, hadn't contributed. I was still seeking their approval back then. 3 months later, they called about a medical bill. Then it was the car transmission. Each time, I transferred the money immediately. Each time, the gratitude period shortened. 2 years into building my consulting firm, I asked for a $3,000 loan to upgrade my office equipment. "Oh, honey," Mom sighed. "Your father and I are on a fixed income. You know that." The next day, Jake posted photos from his trip to Cancun. "Thanks for the birthday gift, Mom and Dad," the caption read. I started the ledger that night. A simple spreadsheet at first. Date, amount, reason given, and a column for repayment, always empty. I didn't know why I was tracking it yet. Something just told me I should. By my 30th birthday, the spreadsheet had grown complex. I'd coded it by category, added interest calculations. I'd given my family over $78,000 in 5 years. The comments column tracked the patterns: Mom's guilt trips, Dad's vague promises, Jake's complete silence on money matters, except when he needed something. My business was thriving despite them. I'd secured Fortune 500 clients, hired staff, bought a downtown office space. Each success was met with the same response from my family: "You're so lucky things come easily to you." Nothing came easily. I worked 16-hour days. I sacrificed relationships, sleep, leisure. Meanwhile, Jake drifted between half-hearted job attempts, living in my parents' guest house. The ledger was my secret rebellion, my silent accounting of the truth. Until the phone call that changed everything. "We have wonderful news," Mom gushed. "We've helped Jake with a down payment on that house he's been eyeing. He's finally ready to be a real adult." "That's great," I said, my stomach tightening. "How much did you lend him?" "Oh, it's not a loan, sweetheart. We gave him $100,000 as a gift. He needs a fresh start." I gripped my phone tighter. "I see. Don't worry about getting something similar," she continued. "We know you don't need help with your fancy career. Besides, you're too ambitious for your own good. Jake deserves some stability." That night, I retitled my spreadsheet, Blood Ledger. Then I added a new column, Consequences. The comment stung not because it was new, but because it was so familiar. Too ambitious. as if ambition were a character flaw rather than the thing that had kept me afloat while they drained my accounts. I pulled up my banking records from the past 7 years. Each withdrawal, each transfer to their account stared back at me in cold numerical judgment. 157, 342, 18 total. Enough for a house of my own. Retirement savings. Freedom. And what had I gotten in return? Criticism. Demands for more. The clear message that my brother, who had never held a job longer than 6 months, was more deserving of their support than I was. I remembered the first time I'd shown my mother my downtown office. Space. She'd looked around at the modern furniture, the view of the city, and said, "It's very nice, dear, but don't you think it's a bit much? People might think you're showing off." The same week, she'd helped Jake buy a new gaming system because he needs something to cheer him up after his breakup. I scrolled through photos on my phone, holiday gatherings where Jake was centered, in every conversation while I was asked to help in the kitchen. Family vacations I'd funded where Jake got the better room because he needs his space. Birthday gifts where he received thoughtful, expensive presents while I got scented candles and a card. The realization crystallized like ice in my veins. I wasn't their daughter. I was their investment account. I pulled out a legal pad and began making notes beside my ledger. Their patterns, their manipulations, the subtle and not so subtle ways they had conditioned me to provide while expecting nothing in return. Then I opened a new browser tab and searched for forensic accountants. The anger I felt wasn't hot. It was cold, calculating, clarifying. I had been played for a fool. But I was a fool with resources, intelligence, and a detailed record of their exploitation. If they wanted to treat me like a business rather than a daughter, I would respond in kind. Family relationships might be complicated, but business was straightforward. They had breached our contract. Now it was time for consequences. I made 3 calls that night. 1 to a forensic accountant recommended by a client, 1 to a private investigator, and 1 to my parents telling them I'd transfer the money for their latest emergency in the morning. "You're a lifesaver, Eliza," Dad said. "We always knew we could count on you." "Of course," I replied, my voice steady. "That's what family is for, right?" As I hung up, I added 1 final note to my ledger. Investigation begins. The next morning, I met Morgan Jenkins, the forensic accountant. Her office was minimalist, efficient, like her demeanor. "I need to understand where my money has actually gone," I explained, sliding a USB drive across her desk. "This contains all my financial records for the past 7 years, including transfers to my family members. I have reason to believe there may be irregularities." She nodded, no judgment in her eyes. "What specifically are you looking for?" "Patterns, discrepancies between stated needs and actual expenditures, and any signs of identity theft or fraud involving my personal information." I didn't tell her about the $100,000 gift to Jake. I didn't need to. The numbers would speak for themselves. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Hey sis, can you spot me $500 until Friday? Car trouble again." I stared at the message, seeing it with new eyes. Not a brother in need. A parasite attaching itself to the most reliable host. "Sure," I texted back. "I'll transfer it now." Then I added it to the ledger along with a note. Evidence collection continues. For the first time in years, I felt something like power returning. They thought I was their perpetual ATM. They had no idea I was building a case that would destroy them. I maintained perfect composure in family interactions while methodically building my case. First, I hired Morgan Jenkins, a forensic accountant recommended by a client. I gave her access to all financial records I had, including the joint family account I'd foolishly maintained for emergencies. "This is something," she said 3 weeks later, sliding a folder across her desk. "There's a pattern of systematic draining here, but there's more." She showed me credit inquiries in my name, 6 of them, that I'd never authorized. 3 had been approved, maxed out, and were carrying balances. "Identity theft," she said simply. "Given the addresses used, I'd say your brother is the culprit." I nodded, neither surprised nor emotional. "What about my father's finances?" Morgan hesitated. There are irregular deposits to his personal account that don't match his pension schedule. Without access to his workplace records, I can't confirm. But it looks like embezzlement, I finished. Potentially, over several years. I thanked her and added her findings to my ledger. Next, I hired a private investigator to observe Jake. The PI documented him using credit cards with my name, making large purchases, bragging to friends about his financial schemes. Meanwhile, my parents called weekly with new emergencies. I fulfilled each request while recording every conversation. The final piece fell into place at Thanksgiving dinner. Jake showed up driving a new luxury SUV. "Just a little something to celebrate the house," he grinned, dangling the keys. Later, I overheard Dad in the kitchen. "Don't worry about the credit check issue. Eliza's score is perfect. They'll never flag it." That night, I found Mom rifling through my purse. "Just looking for mints, honey," she said. I checked my wallet. Later. My backup credit card was missing. 2 days later, an urgent family meeting was called. They needed $50,000 for roof repairs on their house and Jake's medical bills. "Family takes care of family," Dad said firmly when I hesitated. "We've always been there for you," Mom added. Jake just smiled. "Come on, sis. It's not like you don't have it." "Of course," I said, writing a check. Family first. It was the last check I would ever write them. I deposited the investigators' photos and reports in a secure cloud folder labeled Insurance. In them, Jake laughed with friends outside a high-end electronics store, my credit card clearly visible between his fingers. Another showed him at a car dealership signing papers for the SUV with my parents beside him, beaming proudly. The credit card statements Morgan found showed purchases at luxury retailers, expensive restaurants, even a weekend at a resort spa. All under my name, but shipped to Jake's address or locations near my parents' home. Most damning was the audio recording from the PI, capturing Jake at a bar with friends. "Nah, man, I don't need to work that hard. My sister's loaded, and my parents make sure I get my cut. She thinks she's so smart with her business, but we're the ones living the good life on her dime." His friend had asked, "Doesn't she notice?" Jake's laugh was cold. "She's too busy being important. Besides, my parents run interference. They've got her trained like an ATM, put in the guilt code, and money comes out." I listened to the recording exactly once, then filed it away with the rest of the evidence. Emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford yet. This was business now. The family meeting about the $50,000 had been the final confirmation I needed. As they laid out their latest financial emergency, I watched them with new eyes. Mom's practiced concern, Dad's authoritative nods, Jake's barely concealed smirk. They were performing, and I had been their willing audience for years. "I'll need some details," I said, pulling out a notepad, "for my records." "What kind of details?" Dad asked, shifting uncomfortably. "The contractor's estimate for the roof, Jake's medical bills, just so I know exactly what I'm paying for." They exchanged glances. Mom laughed nervously. "Oh, honey, you don't need to worry about all that. We've got the paperwork somewhere." "I'd really prefer to see it," I insisted. $50,000 is a significant amount. Jake rolled his eyes. "Seriously, sis? You don't trust us now?" I looked at him directly, hiding the cold fury behind a mask of concern. "Of course I trust you. I'd just like to see what I'm helping with. That seems reasonable, doesn't it?" Dad cleared his throat. "The thing is, we need to send the money today. The paperwork is, being finalized, but the deadline is firm." I nodded slowly. "I see." Then I wrote the check, knowing it would be the last time they would ever extract a penny from me. As I drove home, I made 2 more appointments, one with my attorney, one with my bank. The next morning, I walked into my bank and closed the joint account. I opened new accounts at a different bank entirely. I froze my credit report and flagged all existing cards for potential fraud. I changed every password, removed my parents as emergency contacts on all accounts, and updated my will to exclude them entirely. By afternoon, I was in my attorney's office. "I need restraining orders," I explained, pushing the folder of evidence across his desk. "And I need to report identity theft and financial fraud." He reviewed the documents, his expression growing grimmer with each page. "This is extensive. he said finally, and clearly deliberate. You understand this will likely result in criminal charges against your brother, possibly your parents as well? I'm counting on it, I replied. He studied me for a moment. Family cases are often the most difficult. People tend to hesitate when it comes to pressing charges. I'm not people, I said, and they stopped being family the moment they decided I was their personal bank. Over the next 2 weeks, I systematically dismantled every connection between us. My attorney drafted a comprehensive letter outlining their financial abuse, identity, theft, and my intention to pursue all legal remedies available. We included enough evidence to make clear I wasn't bluffing, but not enough to show our full hand. At the same time, I began researching family financial abuse. The patterns I discovered were disturbingly familiar. Daughters especially were expected to provide financial support while receiving criticism for their ambition or success. Sons were protected, funded, excused. I wasn't alone. This was systemic. The PI continued his surveillance, documenting Jake making a large cash withdrawal the day after receiving my final check. He followed the money to a luxury watch purchase and a wild night at an exclusive club. Dad, meanwhile, made 3 separate visits to his company's accounting department, leaving each time with manila envelopes tucked under his arm. The evidence continued to accumulate. My ledger expanded to include not just financial transactions, but a comprehensive record of their manipulation and theft. Meanwhile, they continued calling, each message more demanding than the last. We haven't heard from you in days, Mom complained in a voicemail. Your father is worried sick. The roof situation is getting critical, Dad texted. When can we expect the funds? Jake was more direct. Yo, sis, that check you gave us? We need another one. Same amount. Medical stuff got complicated. I didn't reply to any of them. Like a spider, I continued weaving my web, each strand connecting to another. Piece of evidence, another documentation of betrayal. My attorney completed the formal letter. My accountant finalized the financial audit. My bank confirmed all accounts were secured and fraud alerts were in place. Everything was ready. The night before the letter was to be delivered, I sat alone in my office, staring at the spreadsheet that had evolved from a simple accounting to a comprehensive case for prosecution. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. They were still my family. Was I really prepared to destroy them? Then, I remembered Jake's voice on the recording. We've got her trained like an ATM. I remembered my mother's fingers in my purse, her casual dismissal of my ambition while celebrating Jake's minimal efforts. I remembered my father's cool calculation as he leveraged my success to fund their lifestyle, while systematically denigrating my achievements. The doubt vanished, replaced by cold certainty. They had made their choice years ago. Now it was time for mine. I closed the blood ledger and sent the final email to my attorney. Proceed as planned. The letter was delivered by courier to my parents' house, Jake's new house, and their various email accounts simultaneously. Effective immediately, I am terminating all financial support and relationship contact with the following parties. It outlined in clinical detail their systematic financial abuse. It referenced but did not include evidence of identity theft and embezzlement. It detailed the exact amount they had extracted from me, $157,342.18. It closed with a single line, "No further communication will be acknowledged." Within an hour, my phone exploded. Voicemails, texts, emails. I had anticipated this and was already at a hotel under a different name. "You ungrateful bitch," Jake texted. "After everything we've done for you." "We're your parents," Mom wailed in a voicemail. "You can't just dissolve a family like a business contract." Dad was more strategic. "Let's discuss this rationally. There seem to be some misunderstandings that we should clear up." I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I met with attorneys to protect my business and assets. I filed formal identity theft reports with documentation of Jake's fraud. I changed my phone number and email addresses. 2 weeks later, I sent an anonymous package to the ethics department at my father's company, documenting 5 years of systematic embezzlement. The family gathering for my cousin's wedding was the first time they saw me after the letter. I arrived, surrounded by friends, ignoring their attempts to approach until the reception. When they cornered me near the bathroom, I was prepared. "Eliza, you need to stop this madness," Dad hissed. "Family problems stay in the family." I looked at them calmly. Which family problems are those? The identity theft, the embezzlement, or the $157,000 you took from me while giving Jake $100,000? My mother blanched. "Keep your voice down." "Why?" I removed a small recorder from my purse and played Dad's voice. "Don't worry about the credit check issue. Eliza's score is perfect. They'll never flag it." My aunt overheard and stopped, shocked. Other relatives gathered. "Eliza is having some emotional problems," Mom announced loudly. "She's always been high-strung." I simply handed my aunt a folder. "These are copies of the credit cards opened in my name without my knowledge, and these are the transfers from my account to theirs over the past 7 years." Then I walked away as the murmuring started. I didn't need to watch the fallout. The dominoes would fall without me. That night in my hotel room, I registered the domain name, daughtersnotatms.org. The first 24 hours after the letter was delivered were exactly as I had anticipated. Their messages followed a predictable pattern: shock, anger, denial, manipulation, threats. Jake's texts grew increasingly hostile. "You think you're so much better than everyone. You've always been a cold bitch. Wait till everyone hears what you've done." Mom's voicemails descended from tearful pleas to vicious accusations. "After everything we sacrificed for you, your father worked 2 jobs to put you through college. This is how you repay us? By abandoning your family when we need you?" Dad's approach was more calculated. "Eliza, I understand you're upset. We can discuss repayment terms if that would make you feel better. But these accusations of fraud are extremely serious and could damage all of us, including you. Let's handle this privately." My attorney monitored every message, adding them to our evidence file. Meanwhile, I executed the next phase of my plan. I formally reported the credit card fraud, providing the police with Jake's photo using my card, statements showing purchases I never made, and delivery addresses that weren't mine. For my father, I compiled documentation of irregular deposits coinciding with financial emergencies they'd claimed to have. My forensic accountant had traced enough to establish a pattern of embezzlement from his employer of 15 years. I didn't act out of emotion. Each step was calculated, measured, and legally sound. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was seeking justice and restitution. On day 3, my mother showed up at my office. My security staff, already briefed, denied her entry. "Tell my daughter she can't hide forever," she told my receptionist. "Family doesn't abandon family." I watched through the security feed as she was escorted out, her familiar martyr expression firmly in place. By week 2, the initial barrage of messages had slowed. A new tone emerged: panic. The bank called about the credit cards. Jake texted. "What the hell did you tell them? Fix this now." Dad's messages became terse. "There are people asking questions at work. Is this what you wanted? To destroy your family?" I still didn't respond. Instead, I focused on building something from the ruins of their betrayal. The domain I'd registered, daughtersnotatms.org, became the framework for a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping women recognize and escape family financial abuse. I hired a web developer and began compiling resources, statistics, and testimonials from other women I'd found in online forums. The pattern was disturbingly common. Daughters expected to provide financially while sons received support. Women guilted into sacrificing their financial security for family members who gave nothing in return. Identity theft justified as helping the family. My story, anonymized at first, became the centerpiece case study. Meanwhile, the consequences I had set in motion continued to unfold. Jake received formal notice of credit card fraud investigations. His mortgage company flagged irregular activity on his loan application. Dad was called into meetings at work. The company's security team had received evidence of financial irregularities tied to his department. My extended family, who had witnessed my confrontation at the wedding, began reaching out, first to express concern, then to share their own stories of manipulation. "Your mother asked me for $20,000 last year," my aunt confided. "Said it was for Jake's medical bills. Then I saw him posting about his new gaming setup and trip to Vegas. Your father tried to get your uncle to co-sign a loan, another relative shared. When we asked questions, he got angry and said we didn't understand how families should support each other. The narrative was shifting. The family ATM was closed, and the truth was emerging. 3 weeks after the letter, I attended a financial empowerment conference. During networking, I mentioned my nascent organization to several experts in financial abuse. Their interest was immediate. Family financial abuse is severely underreported, one advocate told me, especially when it targets successful women. We need more voices speaking out about this. By the end of the conference, I had connections to legal resources, counseling services, and media contacts interested in highlighting financial abuse as a form of domestic violence. The day I returned from the conference, my cousin called. "Jake's been arrested," she said without preamble. Something about credit card fraud. "Your parents are telling everyone you set him up out of jealousy." I thanked her for the information and added it to my ever-growing documentation. That evening, I received an email from a reporter who had been at the conference. She was writing a feature on financial abuse and wanted to interview me about daughtersnotatms.org. "Would you be willing to share your personal experience?" she asked. "Anonymously, if preferred." I considered the question carefully. Anonymity had been my shield as I built my case. Going public would escalate everything, potentially before all my legal protections were in place. But anonymity also served my family's narrative that I was acting out of spite rather than justice. I replied, "I would be willing to share my story with certain legal considerations, not anonymously." The next morning, my attorney informed me that the police had requested an official statement regarding the identity theft charges against Jake. I spent 3 hours providing detailed testimony, supported by documentation from my forensic accountant and private investigator. As I left the police station, I checked my phone and found a voicemail from my father's company. The head of their ethics department wanted to discuss the information they had received about irregular financial activities. I returned the call, immediately, agreeing to a meeting the following week. The pieces were falling into place faster than I had anticipated. My family had operated in shadows for years, using emotional manipulation to cover financial exploitation. Now everything was exposed to light, and they had no defense against the truth. That night, I received one final message from my mother. "The police came to the house today. They're saying Jake could face jail time. How could you do this to your own brother?" I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and continued working on the Daughters Not ATM's website, adding a new section: Recognizing Gaslighting and Emotional Manipulation in Financial Abuse. The dominoes were falling, and I was building something new from their collapse. I launched Daughters Not ATMs with a simple mission statement: empowering women to recognize, escape, and recover from familial financial exploitation. The website included resources, legal advice, and a forum for sharing stories. I partnered with financial abuse experts and established a legal fund for women seeking to escape situations like mine. My story, carefully anonymized at first, became the centerpiece case study. Within a month, thousands of women had shared similar experiences. The patterns were strikingly consistent: parents extracting resources from daughters while privileging sons, emotional manipulation mixed with financial control, identity theft normalized as helping the family. I hired a PR firm to place articles about financial abuse in major publications. For interviews, I used only my first name and appeared in shadow, not yet ready to fully expose my family. Meanwhile, the consequences I had set in motion unfolded with mechanical precision. Dad was called into an ethics meeting at his company. He was terminated the same day, his pension frozen pending investigation. Jake received notification from 3 credit card companies about fraud investigations. His mortgage company began foreclosure proceedings when the identity theft claims froze his assets. My mother called every family member, friend, and acquaintance, spinning elaborate tales about my mental instability and ingratitude. Few believed her, having seen the evidence at the wedding. I received a cease and desist letter from a mediocre lawyer they'd retained. My attorney, one of the best in the bar, state, responded with a lawsuit outline so comprehensive they never contacted me legally again. 6 months after the letter, Daughters Not ATMs was featured in a national magazine. This time, I used my full name and showed my face. The article detailed my experience and the growing movement of women breaking free from financial exploitation. My consulting business doubled as clients recognized my strategic brilliance. I was invited to speak at financial empowerment conferences. A book deal followed. The day the magazine hit newsstands, my father was indicted for embezzlement. Jake was arrested for credit fraud. My mother gave a disastrous interview to a local newspaper, claiming I had manipulated evidence to punish them for loving my brother more. I kept every tearful voicemail, every threatening text, every desperate email in a special folder labeled documentary evidence. I never raised my voice, never caused a scene. I simply stopped playing their game and exposed the truth with cold precision. The magazine feature changed everything. The journalist, Amara Torres, approached the story with thorough research and unflinching detail. She interviewed financial experts, psychologists, and legal scholars who validated what I had experienced as a recognized form of abuse. Family financial exploitation often hides in plain sight, Amara wrote. For Eliza Morgan, it manifested as a one-way relationship where she served as the family's perpetual bailout fund while watching her brother receive $100,000 as a gift for a house down payment, despite her having been denied even small loans to build her now successful business. The article included redacted but clear documentation of the identity theft, the financial transfers, and the patterns of manipulation. It quoted experts explaining how financial abuse often targets successful women, using cultural expectations of family obligation against them. Most importantly, it connected me with thousands more women experiencing similar situations. After reading Eliza's story, I finally understood what was happening to me, one woman wrote in our forum. My parents refinanced their house 3 times to pay for my brother's failed business ventures, but called me selfish when I wouldn't cash out my 401k to bail them out again. My inbox, filled with desperate messages from women seeking advice, resources, and hope. I hired staff to manage the growing organization, using my business experience to build something that would outlast my personal story. The public exposure was a calculated risk that paid off exponentially. As a shadowy, anonymous founder, I could be dismissed or discredited. As a public figure with documented evidence and professional credentials, I became harder to ignore. My family, predictably, tried to maintain their narrative of me as unstable, ungrateful, and vindictive. Their efforts gained little traction against the mounting evidence. Jake's arrest made local news. The charges were specific and damning: identity theft, credit card fraud, and financial elder abuse related to accounts he had opened in our grandmother's name, another discovery from my forensic accountant. My father's indictment was more substantial. The investigation I had triggered uncovered a pattern of embezzlement spanning nearly a decade. The company issued a formal statement distancing themselves from his actions and cooperating fully with authorities. My mother attempted damage control through a local newspaper interview that backfired spectacularly. When pressed about the $100,000 gift to Jake versus their refusal to help me start my business, she grew defensive. Eliza has always been jealous of the special bond between Jake and us, she told the reporter. She was always so independent and ambitious, we never thought she needed our help. Jake is more sensitive. When asked about the identity theft evidence, she dismissed it as misunderstandings and suggested I had manipulated documents to make them look worse. The reporter then revealed they had obtained court records confirming the charges. The interview ended with my mother claiming I had always been difficult and suggesting I was punishing them for loving Jake more, a quote that became a rallying cry among women in similar situations. My phone rang constantly after the magazine feature, talk shows, podcasts, larger publications. Everyone wanted the story of the successful businesswoman who turned the tables on her financially abusive family. I chose my platforms carefully, focusing on outlets that would treat the issue with appropriate gravity rather than sensationalism. I avoided discussing specifics of the ongoing legal cases, but spoke openly about the patterns of exploitation and the cultural factors that enable them. The hardest part wasn't the money, I explained in one interview. It was the gaslighting, the way they made me feel selfish for having boundaries while simultaneously draining my accounts. They criticized my ambition while depending on its fruits. The organization grew beyond my personal story. We established a legal fund for women filing identity theft claims against family members. We created resources for financial education and boundary setting. We connected victims with therapists specializing in family trauma. 8 months after the letter, I received an invitation to testify before a state legislative committee considering enhanced penalties for familial identity theft. My testimony, alongside research on how frequently such crimes target women, helped advance legislation that would eventually bear my name: the Morgan Act. My consulting business thrived as the publicity highlighted my strategic thinking and principled approach. Clients admired how I had handled a complex personal situation while building something positive from it. My case studies now included financial security planning and identifying exploitation in business relationships. Throughout it all, I maintained the same cold, precise approach that had characterized my initial response. I never engaged in public attacks on my family. I never displayed anger or bitterness in interviews. I simply presented facts, evidence, and expertise. The contrast between my composure and my family's increasingly desperate attempts to salvage their reputation only strengthened my position. Jake, facing multiple felony charges, attempted to paint himself as a victim manipulated by our parents. Dad, awaiting trial for embezzlement, claimed financial pressure from family obligations had driven his actions. Mom continued insisting. I had manufactured evidence out of jealousy. None of their narratives gained traction against the mountain of documentation I had accumulated over years. 10 months after the letter, I received notification that Jake had accepted a plea deal that included restitution, probation, and a felony record. 2 weeks later, my father entered a similar plea for the embezzlement charges. The day after his plea agreement was finalized, my mother sent one final email. I hope you're satisfied now that you've destroyed this family. Your father's reputation is ruined. Your brother's future is damaged forever. All because you couldn't stand that we loved him more than you. You always were too ambitious. For your own good. I forwarded it to my attorney without comment, then returned to reviewing applications for our new scholarship program. Too ambitious to deserve help, which would fund business degrees for women escaping financial abuse. The family ledger was finally balanced, but my work had only begun. 3 years after the letter, I stood at the podium of the National Women's Financial Empowerment Conference, surveying the audience of 5,000. Financial abuse doesn't announce itself, I began. It disguises itself as family obligation, as gender expectation, as love. My nonprofit now employed 30 people and had helped over 10,000 women escape financial exploitation. We had successfully lobbied for legislative changes in 3 states, making familial identity theft a specific category of crime with enhanced penalties. I no longer tracked my family's downfall. I had people for that now. Their updates were clinical. Dad had taken a plea deal, avoiding prison, but permanently barred from financial positions. Jake had served 6 months and was now working at a car wash. My mother was selling homemade crafts online to make ends meet. They had become irrelevant to my story, merely the catalyst for something larger than all of us. The scholarship program was my greatest pride. Too ambitious to deserve help, now fully funded business degrees for 20 young women annually. The application required an essay about overcoming financial barriers created by family. After my keynote, a reporter asked if I had any contact with my family. They are not my family, I replied simply. They were people who saw me as an ATM. My family is here. I gestured to the conference attendees. These are my sisters. That evening, I received a notification that the property once owned by Jake, my parents' $100,000 gift to him, had been foreclosed and was available at auction. I purchased it the next day, not out of spite, but because it was well situated, for our purposes. 6 months later, it reopened as the first dedicated Daughters Not ATMs counseling center, offering free financial planning and legal services to women escaping exploitation. The grand opening made national news. Cameras captured the moment I cut the ribbon, wearing a custom brooch shaped like a ledger book. My mother sent one final email that day. How could you do this to your own family? I didn't respond. Instead, I confirmed final details with the documentary producer who had been capturing the movement's growth for a feature film. We have one last interview to schedule, I told her, with the scholarship recipients. They're the future of this work. That night, I closed my original blood ledger spreadsheet and archived it. I didn't need it anymore. Its purpose had been fulfilled. The ledger had begun as an accounting of pain. It had transformed into a roadmap for liberation, not just for me, but for thousands of daughters who had been told they were too ambitious to deserve help. Turns out that ambition was exactly what the world needed. My legacy wasn't hatred or bitterness. It was systemic change. The Morgan Act, as it became known in legal circles, had been adopted in 17 states by the 3-year mark. It created specific protections against familial financial exploitation and enhanced penalties for identity theft committed by family members. Legal experts credited our organization's research and lobbying efforts with its rapid adoption. Financial abuse within families has been invisible for too long, I told the Senate committee during my testimony. We accept as normal the exploitation of women's success while simultaneously criticizing them for their ambition. This legislation recognizes that theft and fraud don't become acceptable when committed by parents or siblings. Our helpline received over 100 calls daily from women seeking resources to escape financial control. Our legal fund had supported more than 300 cases of identity theft and fraud committed by family members. Our recovery program helped women rebuild their credit, establish boundaries, and recognize manipulation tactics designed to extract resources. Each success story strengthened my resolve. Each woman who reclaimed her financial independence validated my decision to expose my family's exploitation rather than continuing to enable it. The documentary, Blood Ledger, Breaking the Cycle of Family Financial Abuse, premiered at a major film festival to critical acclaim. It followed 5 women, including me, as we navigated the complex process of recognizing, documenting, and escaping financial exploitation by family. The film included audio recordings of my mother's voicemails, clinically analyzed by psychologists who identified classic manipulation tactics. It showed redacted financial records demonstrating the one-way flow of resources from me to my family. It contrasted the $3,000 loan they had refused me with the $100,000 gift to Jake. Most powerfully, it tracked the aftermath. Jake's arrest for fraud, my father's indictment for embezzlement, my mother's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control through emotional manipulation. What makes Eliza Morgan's story particularly compelling, the narrator explained, is not her family's downfall, but what she built from the wreckage. By transforming her personal ledger of exploitation into a movement, she created systemic change for thousands of women facing similar abuse. The film ended with footage from our scholarship award ceremony, where 20 young women shared their stories of financial resilience despite family exploitation. Each had written essays about being told their ambition was a character flaw, while simultaneously being expected to provide for less ambitious family members. At the documentary premiere, a journalist asked the inevitable question, "Have your parents or brothers seen the film? Have they reached out to you?" "I wouldn't know," I replied honestly. "They no longer have access to me, and I no longer track their reactions. This film isn't about them anymore. It's about the pattern they represent and the thousands of women breaking free from that pattern." The property that had once been Jake's house, purchased with my parents' $100,000 gift, while they called me too ambitious to deserve help, had become the physical embodiment of our mission. The counseling center housed financial advisors, legal advocates, therapists, and support groups. The sign above the entrance read, "Your ambition is your strength." My mother walked past it once, according to staff. She stared at the building for several minutes before walking away without entering. I felt nothing when I heard this, neither satisfaction nor pain. She had become irrelevant to my story. 4 years after the letter, I received the Visionary Leadership Award from the National Financial Empowerment Coalition. The citation praised my transformative approach to addressing family financial abuse through education, advocacy, and direct support services. As I accepted the award, I reflected on how thoroughly my life had changed. The constant drain of financial demands had been replaced by the fulfilling work of helping others secure their boundaries. The criticism of my ambition had been replaced by celebration of my vision. The isolation of being the family ATM had been replaced by a community of women supporting each other's success. When I began keeping my ledger, I told the audience I thought I was just tracking numbers. What I was really tracking was the systematic exploitation of my success by those who should have celebrated it. Today, we're building a world where ambition is recognized as strength, where financial boundaries are respected as necessary, and where exploitation can no longer hide behind family obligation. The Foundation's annual report that year showed measurable impact. Decreased rates of familial identity theft in states that had adopted the Morgan Act, improved financial outcomes for women who completed our programs, increased public awareness of financial abuse as a form of domestic violence. 5 years after the letter, I rarely thought about my family at all. They had served their purpose in my story as the catalyst that launched a movement larger than any personal vendetta could encompass. The last update I received about them was clinical and brief. Jake had moved to another state, working minimum wage jobs under the burden of his felony record and restitution payments. My father, barred from financial positions, was stocking shelves at a supermarket. My mother had tried once more to contact me through a distant relative, claiming illness and financial hardship. I instructed my assistant to send them information about public assistance programs, just as we would for any other individuals inquiring about financial resources. No special treatment, no emotional response. That evening, I reviewed applications for the expanded scholarship program, now funding 40 women annually. Each essay told a familiar story. Brilliance diminished, ambition criticized, resources drained, all justified by family obligation. Each applicant represented a daughter breaking free, refusing to remain an ATM, claiming her right to succeed without being penalized for that success. That was my true legacy. Not the destruction of my family, but the construction of a movement that would long outlast their exploitation. The blood ledger had balanced, but the work continued.